What if the bloodline that every guild on this continent called trash was actually the most dangerous weapon ever born, and the men who rejected you, the woman who left you, the family that whispered behind your back, all of them knew it, and all of them spent their entire careers making sure you never found out. I am Luna. I collect stories the official histories try to bury, and this one, the one I am about to tell you, was buried so deep that even the guild registries pretended it never happened. They burned the records, they paid off the chroniclers, they scrubbed the name Ashcroft from the Academy archives. But blood remembers what paper forgets. And somewhere in a provincial graveyard on the edge of the continent, a 22-year-old boy with 12 rejection letters in his pocket was about to wake up the longest, oldest, most patient weapon any guild had ever feared. His name was Caleb Ashcroft, and before this night was over, he was going to inherit the memory of 80 generations of hunters. Every kill, every wound, every technique, every secret. And he was going to walk back into the city that humiliated him, with all of them standing behind his shoulders. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because before the awakening, there has to be the breaking. And what they did to Caleb in the months before that night on the grave, what 12 guilds, 1 fiancé, and 1 rival did to him, is the kind of slow, methodical humiliation that you only inflict on someone you are secretly terrified of. Let me show you. Caleb Ashcroft was born in a province called Hollowmere. It is the kind of place city people forget exists. Old farmland, low stone walls, a market square that has not changed in 300 years, and 1 academy, small, underfunded, ignored by the Central Guild Council. The Ashcroft family had lived there for as long as anyone could remember. They had a crest, they had a chapel, they had a graveyard older than most kingdoms, and in that graveyard, the oldest stone was carved with a name nobody outside Hollowmere recognized anymore. Silas Ashcroft, Caleb's great-grandfather. Silas had been a hunter, the last real hunter of the Ashcroft line. The stories said he could pull a longbow that no other man in the province could even bend. They said he tracked a moonback wolf for 9 days through a blizzard and killed it with a single arrow at 300 paces. They said when he died, the wolves in the northern hills howled for 2 nights straight. Caleb's grandmother used to whisper these stories to him when he was a child, and Caleb believed every word. His parents did not. His parents were practical people. His father ran a small trade in dried herbs. His mother ran the household and was tired by the time she was 30. They told Caleb, gently at first, then less gently, that hunter stories were for old women and idiots, that the modern world ran on ranks and certifications and guild contracts. That if Caleb wanted to make something of himself, he would go to the provincial academy, awaken whatever class the goddess gave him, and try to test into one of the big city guilds. That was the only path. Nostalgia was a luxury for people who already had money. Caleb listened. He worked. He trained. He studied military history, magical theory, basic anatomy of the lesser beasts. He spent his evenings in the academy library reading hunter manuals from a century ago, manuals that, even then, his instructors gently mocked as outdated. He was not the strongest boy in his class. He was not the most magically gifted, but he was patient. He was thorough. And he had something the other boys did not. He loved the work. Not the prestige, the work itself, the tracking, the waiting, the reading of wind and ground. When the awakening ceremony came at age 18, the ritual where every young person in the kingdom touches the awakening stone and learns their class, Caleb walked into the chamber with quiet confidence. He had prepared for this his whole life. He expected something hunter adjacent, maybe ranger, maybe marksman, maybe even beast tracker. Any of those would have placed him in the lower middle of the rank hierarchy, solid, respectable, employable. He placed his hand on the stone glowed, the light traveled up his arm, the recording crystal flared, and the priestess read the result out loud in front of the entire town. Class. Heir. The chamber went quiet. Then somebody in the back, laughed. A short, sharp, embarrassed laugh. And then the laughter spread, because everyone knew what Heir meant. Heir was a junk class. Heir meant nothing. Heir was the class you got when the goddess had nothing specific to give you, so she just labeled you with your last name and sent you on your way. There were no Heir guilds, there were no heir training programs. The official guild registry listed heir under miscellaneous unranked, along with classes like farmer and lamplighter and scribe. Caleb stood there with his hands still on the stone, and he watched his future die in real time. His mother's face went white. His father turned and walked out of the chamber without a word. His instructor, a man who had once told Caleb that he had real potential, would not meet his eyes. The not cry. He had been raised not to cry, but somewhere inside him, in a place he could not name, something old and very, very patient woke up and started listening. He did not know it yet, but the moment that priestess said heir out loud was the moment 80 generations of dead hunters turned their heads in unison and began paying attention. But that came later. First, Caleb had to be broken further, because the world is not satisfied with humiliating you once. The world wants to see if you will accept it. The world wants you to learn your place. Caleb refused to learn it. For the next 4 years, he did something nobody in his class did. He worked. He took every menial guild contract that would accept a heir. He cleaned beast stables for E-rank guilds. He carried equipment for low-level hunting parties. He picked up arrowheads after expeditions. He listened. He watched. He memorized every technique he saw, the way a ranger drew a bow, the way a knight angled a shield, the way a marksman corrected for wind. He filled 3 notebooks with sketches and notes. He learned to track. He learned to skin. He learned to read trail sign that even some C-rank hunters missed. And every year, when the Central Guild recruitment season came, Caleb traveled to the capital and applied. The first guild was the Iron Wolves. He stood in their courtyard with 20 other applicants, most of them already wearing the colored sashes of higher-ranked classes. When the recruiter got to his application and read the word heir, the man laughed out loud. Not cruelly, just genuinely surprised that someone with that class had bothered to show up. He handed the paper back and said, "Son, we have a strict B-rank minimum. Try the support guilds." Caleb thanked him and walked out. The second guild was the Silver Lance. The recruiter did not even look up. She just stamped the application, rejected, and pushed it across the desk. The third guild was the Stormbreakers. They at least let him into the audition hall. He shot 20 arrows at a moving target. He hit 18. The judges looked at each other. One of them said, "Impressive accuracy. What's your class?" Caleb told the truth. The judge's face changed. He said, "We don't take heir, kid. Doesn't matter how well you shoot. Guild insurance won't cover an unranked class on hunts." Rejected. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Each rejection was a small, precise cut. None of them were dramatic. None of them were cruel. They were worse than cruel. They were polite. They were professional. They were the kind of rejection that left no scar for anyone else to see, but left Caleb walking out of each guild hall with a little more of his future bleeding out behind him. The 12th Guild was a small frontier outfit called the Bracken Watch. They were so desperate for warm bodies that they had been known to take D-rank classes when nothing better was available. Caleb walked in expecting that this, finally, would be the one. The Bracken Watch recruiter was an old woman with one eye and a permanent scowl. She read his application. She looked at him for a long time, and then she said, quietly, almost gently, "Boy, I have been doing this job for 30 years. I have signed contracts with every garbage class the goddess ever invented. But there is a memo. There is a memo from the Central Council. It says if any guild in this kingdom signs an Ashcroft heir, that guild loses its central licensing. Do you understand what I am telling you?" Caleb did not understand. He said so. The old woman leaned closer. "Somebody up top is making very sure that no heir from your bloodline ever gets into a registered guild. It is not about you. It is about your name. And I cannot help you. If I could, I would. But I cannot afford to lose my license. Go home, boy." That was the 12th rejection. That was the one that broke something in Caleb that the other 11 could not reach. Because the other 11 had been about him, his class, his bloodline, his perceived worthlessness. The 12 told him that someone, somewhere, with real power, was specifically and deliberately making sure he never had a future, that his name was on a blacklist, that somebody was afraid of him. He did not yet understand what that fear was about. He would. He walked out of the Brackenwatch Guildhall into a gray capital city afternoon and stood in the street for a long time. He had no money for the journey home. He had been sleeping in a public dormitory and eating one meal a day. His parents would not lend him another silver. They had made that very clear when he left. And it was then, walking through the merchant district with nowhere to go and no plan and no class and no future, that he saw the carriage. The carriage was white and gold. The horses were matched gray. The banners on the side were the colors of House Vane, and inside the carriage, sitting very close to a tall man Caleb had never seen before but immediately recognized from the guild rankings, Marcus Vane, S rank, top 15 in the kingdom. Sitting next to him, with her hand resting on his arm and a small white flower in her hair, was Eliza Holloway. Caleb stopped walking. She saw him. Through the carriage window, their eyes met. For one full second she looked at him. She did not look ashamed. She did not look guilty. She did not look anything. She looked through him, as though he was a piece of street furniture, as though the boy who had spent 6 years writing her letters from the academy library was not standing 6 feet from her carriage door. The carriage rolled past. Caleb stood in the street. A merchant pushing a cart bumped into him and swore. Caleb did not move. He stood there until the carriage was gone. And then he stood there for another long minute, and then he started walking. He walked all the way home to Hollowmere. He walked for 9 days. He slept in barns. He ate berries and what little stale bread strangers gave him. By the time he reached the outskirts of his home province, he had not spoken to another human being for over a week. And here's the thing I want you to understand, because this is the thing every story like this depends on, and most storytellers skip past it. This is the moment that belongs to every single person watching this video, whether you have ever heard of a guild or a hunter class or a fantasy world or not. Because every single person watching this right now has had their own version of that walk back from the capital. Maybe yours did not involve a carriage with a white and gold banner. Maybe yours involved a hiring manager who would not return your calls, a university that lost your application 3 times in a row, a family dinner where you watched everyone laugh at a joke that was really about you. A message on a phone screen that said, "I think we should talk," and you already knew what came after the talk. That walk, the long, quiet 9-day walk where nobody speaks to you and the world has officially told you that you do not matter. That walk belongs to every human being who ever tried to build something and was told their bloodline, their class, their background, their face, their name was not enough. Caleb did that walk in a fantasy kingdom with a sword on his back. You did it on a subway, or in a car, or on a couch staring at a ceiling for 6 hours. Different setting, same walk. And the reason this story matters, the reason I am telling it to you and not some other one, is because of what happened at the end of Caleb's walk. Because what happened at the end of Caleb's walk is the thing every walker secretly hopes is true. The thing that turns the humiliation from a final verdict into a setup for something nobody saw coming. Caleb reached the edge of Hollowmere on the evening of the 9th day. The sun was going down. The fields were gray gold. He did not go to his parents' house. He could not. He could not face them. Not yet. So he did what he had done as a small boy whenever he was hurt and did not want anyone to see. He went to the old family chapel and the graveyard behind it. The graveyard with the oldest stones. The graveyard with Silas Ashcroft's marker. He had not been there in years. The path was overgrown. The chapel roof had a hole in it now. The Ashcroft graves were arranged in a half circle around a single tall stone, Silas's, that had weathered down until you could barely read the carving. Caleb sat down. Then he lay down. He pressed his cheek against the cold stone of Silas's marker. He was so tired he could not feel his legs. He was so empty, he could not feel his thoughts. He closed his eyes. He whispered, and I want you to hear this exactly, because the records that survived from that night recorded this whisper, and the priestess who later examined the site said this whisper was the activation phrase. He whispered, "I am the last one. There is no one after me. If you can hear me, old man, if any of you can hear me, I am sorry I could not carry it." and he fell asleep. What happened next is the thing the Central Guild Council spent 80 years making sure no one ever found out about. The thing that explained the blacklist. The thing that explained the memo at the Brackenwatch. The thing every guildmaster in the kingdom feared more than any A-rank beast. Because Caleb's blood was on the stone. There was a small cut on his forehead from a branch on the path. He had not even noticed it. A single line of blood had traced down his face and pooled, just a drop or two, against the weathered carving of Silas Ashcroft's name. And the stone that had stood there for 96 years without a flicker, began to glow. Not bright, not yet. A pale, slow blue light, the color of deep water at twilight. The light spread from the carved letters into the rest of the stone. It traveled down into the earth. It traveled through the roots of the old chapel yew. It traveled through the soil into every other Ashcroft grave in the half-circle. One by one, every marker began to glow with the same pale blue light. And then, around the sleeping body of Caleb, the air itself began to thicken. A system message, the kind every awakened person in the kingdom knew, the kind that appeared in front of your eyes when the goddess wanted you to see something, appeared in front of Caleb's closed eyelids. He saw it in his sleep. He saw it the way you see things in dreams that you know are real. Class Heir. True form detected. Ancestral synchronization initiated. 80 generations registered. Warning. Consciousness load exceeds safety threshold. Proceed? In his sleep, Caleb, who had nothing left, who had no future, who had walked 9 days to die on a grave because he could not think of anywhere else to go, said yes. The light around the graveyard turned from pale blue to deep cobalt, and then, one by one, the figures began to appear. The first was a man Caleb did not recognize, and could not have recognized, because the man was wearing the leather and bone armor of a tribal hunter from over 2,000 years ago. He carried a spear with a flint head. His face was scarred. He looked down at Caleb sleeping on the stone, and his expression, and the witnesses who later pieced this together from fragments, said this is the part that broke them. His expression was tender, like a grandfather looking at a grandson who has been hurt at school. The second figure was a woman in the chainmail of a medieval marcher knight, a long sword across her back, her hair cut short for the helmet. The third was a man in a tricorn hat carrying a long flintlock rifle, the kind hunters used 300 years ago when the first guild charters were written. The fourth wore the green coat of an Imperial-era ranger. The fifth, the simple wool of a peasant trapper. The sixth, the formal hunting livery of an early industrial nobleman. The seventh, a snow-camouflaged scout. The eighth, a fur-trimmed Arctic hunter with a harpoon. They kept appearing, from every era, from every century the Ashcroft line had survived through. And the Ashcroft line, Caleb did not yet know, was older than the kingdom itself. The Ashcrofts had been hunters before the first guild was founded. The Ashcrofts had been hunters before the first king was crowned. The Ashcrofts had been hunters when the continent was still mostly forest and the great beasts still walked openly in the daylight. 80 figures, 80 generations, standing in a wide ring around the sleeping body of the boy who had whispered, "I am the last one." And Silas Ashcroft, the great-grandfather Caleb had only ever seen in one faded portrait, stepped forward from the line. He was a tall man with a hunter's lean build and a beard going gray. He wore a longbow across his back. He knelt down beside his great-grandson. He placed one transparent hand on Caleb's forehead. And he said, in a voice that the priestess later swore she could still hear in her sleep, "You carried it further than you know, boy. Wake up. We have work to do." Caleb's eyes opened. The graveyard was full of ghost hunters. They were watching him. They were waiting. They were not threatening. They were patient. 80 generations of patient. The kind of patient that had spent centuries waiting for one descendant to be desperate enough, broken enough, and alone enough to put his blood on the stone. The system message returned, calmer now, organized. Class, Heir, unclassified rank, true designation, vessel of 80. Passive, all ancestral techniques available for inheritance. Passive, physical conditioning scales to technique demand. Active, summon ancestor guidance, no cooldown. Restriction, power level hidden from all detection scans. Restriction: if killed, line ends permanently. Caleb sat up. He looked at Silas. He looked at the 80 hunters standing around him. He understood, suddenly and completely, why the Central Guild Council had blacklisted his name. Heir was not a junk class. Heir had never been a junk class. Heir was the most dangerous class the goddess had ever created. A class that scaled with bloodline depth, that inherited every technique every ancestor had ever mastered, that could not be measured by any rank scan, and that the major guilds had spent 200 years systematically suppressing because a single, fully awakened heir from a long bloodline could outmatch an entire guild. They had not blacklisted him because he was worthless. They had blacklisted him because they knew exactly what he was, and they were terrified of the day he found out. Silas stood up. He gestured to the ring of ancestors. He said simply, "We have 6 months before they realize the suppression failed. In 6 months, every guild on this continent is going to come for you. Stand up. Pick up a bow." Caleb stood up. His legs did not shake anymore. He picked up a bow that one of the ancestors, the Imperial Ranger, held out to him. The bow was not real in the normal sense. It was ancestral. It was memory made into wood and string. The moment Caleb's hand closed around the grip, every muscle in his arm knew exactly how to draw it. Every nerve knew the release point. Every fiber of him understood, for the first time in his life, that he had never been bad at anything. He had only been incomplete. The first arrow he loosed that night flew across the graveyard, through a gap in the chapel ruins, across the open field beyond, and struck the centermost knot of a dead oak tree 420 paces away. Dead center. In the dark. With no aim. Silas nodded once. Good. Now do it again, with your eyes closed, while running. The first lesson is, the body remembers what the mind never learned. By morning, you will know what your great-grandmother knew about wind. By the end of the week, you will know what my father knew about tracking through snow. By the end of the month, you will know what every hunter in this circle ever bled to understand. And by the end of 6 months, when the Iron Wolves and the Silver Lance and Marcus Vane himself come riding into Hollowmere to find out what activated on the central detection grid tonight, you will be ready to teach them what an Ashcroft is. Caleb did not say anything. He nocked another arrow. The training began that night and did not stop for 179 days. I want to stop here for a moment because there is something important about this section of the story that the original chronicles got wrong and that I want to correct, since I have been through the surviving fragments more carefully than the official historians ever bothered to. The official version says Caleb trained with his ancestors. That makes it sound peaceful. That makes it sound like a montage in a film, where a kindly grandfather teaches a boy to shoot, and there is gentle music in the background. That is not what happened. What happened was that 80 generations of dead hunters, every single one of whom had died violently, most of them in their 40s or younger, every one of whom carried lifetimes of grief and unfinished business and unspoken rage at how their line had been suppressed. Every single one of them had something to give Caleb, and they were not gentle about giving it. The ancient tribal spearmen beat him bloody every morning with the butt of a flint spear until Caleb learned to read the shift of weight in another body before the body itself committed to a movement. The medieval knight made him stand in armor he could barely lift, in the rain, for 9 hours, until he understood what it meant to hold a defensive line when your arms were screaming. The flintlock hunter forced him to load and fire a phantom rifle in the dark over and over for a week until his fingers could do it faster than thought. The Arctic harpooner made him swim in the icy river at the back of the property for 3 weeks straight, every morning before dawn, until his lungs adapted to the kind of cold that kills most men in 4 minutes. And every night, Silas would sit beside him at the chapel fire and explain, slowly, calmly, the way you explain something to a son you only get 6 months to raise, what each technique was for, what kind of beast it killed, what kind of enemy it stopped, what kind of moment in a battle would call for it. Caleb stopped eating much. He did not need to. The class itself was reshaping his metabolism, drawing on something the system called ancestral reserve. that none of the modern guild scholars even knew existed. His body grew leaner, his shoulders broadened. His eyes, the people in Hollowmere who saw him from a distance during those months said this, his eyes started to look a little older than they should have. Not in a tired way, in a watchful way. The way an old hunter's eyes look when he has spent 30 winters reading the woods. By the end of the second month, Caleb killed his first beast alone, a C-rank bristleback in the Blackthorn Forest north of Hollowmere, a creature that had killed 2 registered hunters from a neighboring province the previous spring. Caleb tracked it for 2 days, learned its feeding pattern, set up at a wind angle the beast could not catch, and put a single arrow through the soft spot behind its left ear. He skinned it himself. For years, started receiving reports from farmers that the wolves were gone, the boars were gone, the night stalkers were gone. They sent a scout. The scout found tracks, human tracks. One man, working alone, taking down creatures that should have required a full party. The scout reported back. The provincial guildmaster, an old woman named Marin Coldfell, who had quietly never liked the Central Council, wrote a single line in her ledger. Something has woken up in Hollowmere. Do not report to capital yet. She bought Caleb another 4 weeks. By the end of the 5th month, Caleb went back into Hollowmere proper for the first time. He walked into the market square at noon. The market square where, 4 years earlier, the priestess had said Heir out loud and the laughter had spread. He was wearing a hunter's long coat of dark green that he had made himself from the bristleback hide. He had a longbow across his back that no one in the province had ever seen the like of. He had Silas's bone-handled hunting knife at his belt, the knife that had been in his family chapel under glass for 96 years and that had quietly, on the night of the awakening, gone missing from its case. People stopped talking when he walked past. Children pointed. An old farmer, the same old farmer who had laughed loudest at the awakening ceremony 4 years ago, set down his sack of grain and stared. Caleb did not look at any of them. He went into the provincial guild office. He stood in front of Marin Coldfell. He set a sealed scroll on her desk. He said, "I want to register a new guild. Charter name, House Ashcroft. Filing it through provincial authority, not central." Marin Coldfell read the scroll. She looked up at him. She said one sentence. "Boy, do you have any idea what you are starting?" Caleb said, "Yes." She signed the charter. I am going to pause the narrative here for one moment because we are about halfway through this story and I want to mark a line in the sand for what comes next. Because what comes next is no longer the rise. What comes next is the war. What comes next is the moment Marcus Vane, the S-rank hunter who took Eliza Holloway, who has heard rumors out of Hollowmere and who does not yet believe them, saddles up with 12 of his best men and rides into the province expecting to find a country bumpkin with a lucky streak. What comes next is the founding of House Ashcroft and the 4 broken people who became its first members. A disgraced healer named Mira Vance, who was cast out of the Silver Lance for refusing to let a wounded farmer die. A retired thief named Jasper Korn, who knows every guild's blind spot because he stole from each of them. A teenage magic user named Nora Vell, whose talent for shadowcraft was so feared by the Academy that they refused to issue her a license. And one quiet scout named Theodore Wexley, who showed up at the gates of the new guild hall asking to join, and who is, although Caleb does not yet know it, a deep cover operative of the Crimson Spear, sent personally by Guildmaster Damon Crow to find out what Hollowmere is hiding. What comes next is the first real test. The day Marcus Vane's party arrives at the edge of Hollowmere with the casual swagger of an S-rank hunter visiting a backwater, and finds that the backwater has fangs. What comes next is Eliza Holloway, 3 months later, riding into Hollowmere alone on a horse she borrowed in the middle of the night, with an expression on her face that nobody at Marcus Vane's estate has ever seen, because she has finally learned something about Marcus Vane that she did not want to learn, and the only person in the world she can think to ride to is the boy whose carriage window stare she has been trying to forget for 9 months. And what comes next, finally, is the shadow on the horizon that the eldest ancestor in Caleb's circle, the tribal spearman who lived 2,000 years ago and who never speaks unless he has to, quietly mentioned for the first time on the night of the awakening, the shadow that he and 79 other Ashcrofts have been waiting for, generation after generation, hoping it would not come back in their lifetimes. The A-rank beast that the Central Guild Council does not even have a registered designation for. The thing that killed an entire Ashcroft generation in the year 1407 and has not been seen since. It is moving again. The southern provinces are reporting unexplained losses. The migration patterns of the lesser beasts have started to flow northward, away from something. The ancestors in Caleb's circle have started to look south at night, the way an old soldier looks toward a battlefield he hoped never to fight on again. And in the Central Guild capital, in a tower that does not appear on any official map, the guild masters of the 12 major houses are sitting around a table, reading a report from a Crimson Spear field operative, a young scout named Theodore Wexley, that confirms what they have been afraid of for 80 years. The report is one sentence long. It says, "The Heir bloodline has fully awakened." Damon Crow sets the report down. He looks around the table at the 11 other masters. He says, "Then we have a problem. Because the only thing in this kingdom that can stand against what is coming out of the south is the one bloodline we spent 2 centuries making sure could never rise. And we just made him an enemy." The room is quiet. In Hollowmere, Caleb Ashcroft is teaching Nora Vell how to thread shadowcraft through a longbow arrow. Silas is watching from beside the chapel wall. The autumn sun is going down. A wind comes up from the south, carrying a smell that none of the modern hunters in Caleb's new guild can identify, but that the ancestral spearman recognizes the moment it reaches the graveyard. He turns. He looks at Silas. He nods once. Silas walks over to where Caleb is teaching, places a hand on his great-grandson's shoulder, and says, very quietly, "It is starting. Faster than we thought. Boy, finish the lesson, then come to the chapel. There is something I have not told you yet, something none of us have told you yet, about what your line was actually made to do." Caleb sets down the arrow. He looks at Silas. He looks at the south horizon. He looks at the 4 people standing in his new guild hall, the healer, the thief, the shadow mage, the scout he does not yet know is a traitor, and he understands, somewhere in the old part of him that woke up on the grave, that the rise is over. The war is starting, and the war is bigger than the guilds. The war is bigger than Marcus Vane. The war is bigger than Damon Crow and the 12 houses and the Central Council and every petty rejection Caleb has ever survived. The war is the thing the Ashcrofts were made for. The war is the thing 80 generations of hunters have been preparing one descendant after another to fight, and they did not succeed in time. The line ran out. The last Ashcroft was a rejected boy with 12 refusal letters and a fiancée in another man's carriage. So they made him into the weapon anyway. In 6 months, on a grave, out of grief and patience and the kind of love that survives death. In the next episode, I will tell you what the Southern Shadow really is. I will tell you what happened in the year 1407. I will tell you the name of the thing that killed 80 Ashcrofts in a single winter, and why the Central Guild Council struck the event from every official record. And I will tell you about the night Marcus Vane rode into Hollowmere expecting tribute, and rode out without his bow, his pride, or 2 of his best men. But for now, for tonight, I want you to remember one thing, because this is the thing that matters more than any rank, any class, any guild, any system message. Caleb Ashcroft did not become powerful because the goddess favored him. Caleb Ashcroft did not become powerful because of a lucky awakening. Caleb Ashcroft became powerful because he refused to stop walking even when the world had taken everything from him and left him with nothing but a grave to sleep on. Because somewhere in the worst night of his life, he whispered an apology to the people who came before him, and they whispered back. The roots of every person watching this video go deeper than you know. The people who came before you bled for things you will never read about. The reason you are still standing, the reason you got up this morning, the reason you are watching a story about a fictional boy in a fictional kingdom and feeling something tighten in your chest is because somewhere in your line, a long time ago, somebody refused to be the last one. You are not the last one either. You are the next one. And whatever you are carrying right now, the rejection letter, the wedding you were not invited to, the family member who would not meet your eyes, the dream that 12 doors closed on, all of it is the same grave Caleb slept on. All of it is the stone. All of it is the place where, if you press your face against it and refuse to let go, something very old and very patient finally wakes up. I am Luna. I followed this story to the edge of what the official chronicles will allow. I will be back next time with the rest of it, the war, the betrayal, the shadow from the south, and the moment Caleb Ashcroft puts an arrow through the throat of the man who took everything from him and learns that revenge was never the point. Until then, find out who your ancestors actually were. Sometimes everything you need has been buried, the whole time, 6 feet under where you have been standing. Stay close. The next episode is the one they tried hardest to erase.